Well, hello everyone. This is Jacob Bryant back again with you, wanting to go over some tips for synchronous live instructional strategies. I got really good feedback from the previous video, and I wanted to elaborate on that with how you can best use your live Google Meet classrooms to meet your instructional needs. So I want to go back over this slide that was in the previous presentation, and that was the three types of online instruction, or the three types of remote instruction. So there's synchronous, which is what we're going to focus on. Live instruction, think like FaceTime, Google Meet, Zoom. We're going to talk about what that is in this screencast. The asynchronous instruction is the work that's going on in Google Classroom, the work that's going on in Blackboard. And then there's the folks that unfortunately don't have great internet access that are using textbooks and worksheets. Now, I will say this. I had a lot of students that were very worried that they wouldn't have good internet access, like to a computer. However, they have great phone access. And one of the best parts about Google Meet is it can be used on a cell phone. So they don't actually have to have access to a computer. And where that's going to come up big is if they can attend the live meeting, they're probably going to get more out of it anyway, because it's live, sequentially paced instruction where conversations are happening and questions are being asked. Then you can exempt them from that packet work. I think I said this in my last video. If they can come to a synchronous meeting, we may not necessarily need them to do all of the asynchronous work, or we may not need them to do all of the packet work. We may just want to save a quiz or a test to assess their learning at some point outside of the synchronous environment, but we don't feel the need to do both. Okay, getting right into the framework here. The very first thing you've got to do is set a schedule. For me, it's every day at 9 a.m. You're going to want to coordinate this with the other people that you work with to get a pulse for when their Google meetings are, if they're having those, so that students don't have to choose between which one they're going to attend. And I do recommend avoiding evenings. I think anything we can do to keep these kids on a normal schedule, normalcy in school and in-school instruction, is the best thing to do. So coordinate a time and set to it. If it's going to be every day at 9, if it's going to be every day at 10, that's when it's going to be. And I do recommend every day. I do give the students that daily opportunity. If you can't do that, I do recommend alternating dates, if nothing else. That's still better than no live instruction. A 30-minute maximum time limit. Highly recommend a 30-minute maximum time limit. Just like in our classrooms, students, need to get up and go to the bathroom after 30 minutes. Just trying to keep them engaged for 30 minutes when you're not there standing over their shoulder is going to be somewhat difficult. Consider a test meeting. Before I did my first live meeting, I did a test meeting where we went over norms and what it's like to mute, whether or not we should have our video cameras on, how to use chat, how we would practice raising our hands, how we would use the online environment. So if you're going to start these Google Meets the Monday after spring break, maybe have a test meeting on the Thursday or Friday before spring break, just kind of sharing that information with students and reconnecting with them, and ultimately have a purpose for these meetings. My biggest suggestion is not just to use these as office hours. Students don't really know what to do with office hours, because if you think about it, at school, we don't really have office hours. And so, they may have a question, but they're more likely to probably email you that. So I would highly recommend using this as instructional time, and I'm going to go over some instructional strategies to keep the content rigorous. Okay, but have a purpose. All right, so whenever you're setting up the Google Live Classroom, you're going to have to get a live link, and we are equipped to be able to do that. So I'm going to go to the waffle and find Google Meet. Here it is. And when I do that, it's going to pull up the Google Meet page and join or start a meeting. I want to start a meeting, and I might call this Dr. Bryant's live class. Okay, and it's not going to let me use that apostrophe, but then I can hit continue. And what that will do is that will populate a meeting room for me, which I need to do. Oh, well, it didn't, but let's try again. And it will populate a meeting room for me. Now, your control over your microphone and your camera are right here, and they'll also be available once you get in the meeting room. But I can go ahead and hit join now. And then the very first thing that it does is it pops up the link that anyone would join to be a part of this live instruction. You can also do a dial-in option. I've not ever seen anybody do that. Typically, they just click the link. And like I said, they can do that on a cell phone as well. And so you can copy that link. And then what I recommend doing is putting that in your Google Classroom under a specific header. So Google Meet Hangout Live link and recordings. So you can actually add content here. So I can create just material if I'm wanting to put a link, and I can call this Live Classroom link. Every day at 9 a.m. And you can post that link in the descriptor. And what that will do is that will allow that link to be populated in your Google Classroom. And I can put it under that header as well. And I'm going to delete this because I've already got one. But what that will allow your students to do is have a place that they can easily. Oh, I don't think I actually wanted that topic deleted. I'm going to have to go back and add that. There we go. What that will allow them to do is have a place that they can easily go to access the Hangout link. And so when they do that, they can jump right into the call. And it does seat up to 100. I haven't exceeded that so far, so I'm not sure exactly what happens whenever you hit that mark. I have had up to 85, but that will allow you to have those meetings. The other option that you have inside your meeting is to record, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But a reminder on some of the controls is the microphone, to end the call, to turn off your camera, to turn off your microphone. And then up in the corner, there is the participants window. So if I had my 85 students, they're going to start to populate along this window under people. The chat, so I can type in the chat any message that I want. So I might say mute. But regardless, that's what that's there for. I'm going to go back to my slides for just a second. Keep the link the same. Don't feel like you have to do a new Google Meet link every day. Keep that link the same and keep it in that Google Classroom in the same place so students just have a continuous place to click to whenever they join for the meeting. Like I said, add the link as a topic in Google. I'm going to talk about having a mute slide in a later part of this presentation. Use the chat to get student responses. So I'm going to talk about some instructional strategies, but allow students to respond via chat. And what I've actually found is students are really good. If other students have questions, they're good at answering those questions for you. So what did he just say? And then somebody, can reply to them. It's a live chat that they've got going on during the whole meeting. And so that's there for you. If you're asking an ABCD question, A, B, the chat is going to be your best friend in trying to elicit student responses. And then, like I said, you can record the meeting for others to watch later. So maybe students couldn't join you, but you go over some really important stuff and you think the students that couldn't join might benefit from hearing it later. You can hit record meeting. And then what that will actually do is it will populate the recording whenever you're done. It will populate the recording into your Google Drive, and you'll actually get an email confirming that the link is available, and then you can share that with your students that they may want to watch later. You can even post it to your Google Classroom as recording from day March 25th, 2020, and you can even add that recording to your Google Classroom. So I said having a mute slide, just so that students are able to visually see when it's time to mute. You're going to want to do that. So if you go into present now, and then you can do a window or your entire screen, it'll ask you to click and then share. And then what that will do is you can practice sharing that mute slides. That way it tells the students how to mute. And I'll be honest with you guys, I can get 83 sixth graders to mute in less than 30 seconds. It works really, really well. They do a great job with this. These kids are digital natives, and so they are just experts at this. All right, let's talk about live instructional foundations. So one of the things that you're going to want to do is set the norms. So set the norms are as soon as it's time for class to start, everybody hits that mute button. Everybody hits that mute button. And I show the mute slides so that everybody knows how to do it. And you can mute them. It's just easier if You don't have to go down through there and click every single student's microphone for your live meeting. Google Slides is a must. I think you've got to have something. If you're just sitting there trying to have conversations with 80 students at a time and they have no visual aid, it's going to be very difficult. So having a Google Slides to go through that you're presenting from is ideal. And then having an attendance system. So what I do is I have my students fill out a Google form that I link in every day. So I just pop that link into the chat, first name, last name, class period. And then what I can do is go in and sort that by class period, sort it by first and last name, and plug in their 5 points for the day for attending the class. And so having an attendance system is going to be huge. Have an agenda. So what are you going to cover? Just like you would on your board and your dry erase board in your room. You know, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. I also recommend having a warm-up, kind of a launching point. So something that lends to what we did yesterday, getting students started just like you would in classroom with a warm-up or a morning work or a bell work, something quick that you can keep going with. And then a closing point. So one of my favorite strategies from these sessions I actually learned from someone else, and that is using the final word whip. And so I just have students type into the chat the word or phrase or sentence that stuck out to them most during the live session. And so that's kind of their exit ticket in this live session. So those norms, I didn't talk about these, and I do want to go back before I move on. RH is the way students type raise their hand, but I will tell you, I don't necessarily call on students just because they're raising their hand right away in those sessions, because I found that it does slow instruction down. So unless I'm at a point where I actually want them raising their hand and I want to hear back from them, I say, all right, I'll get questions at the end, or I'll get questions in a minute, but I'm going to keep going until we finish this instructional sequence, and I'll talk about that. All right, live instructional strategies. So there are still a large range of instructional strategies that will work in the live classroom. As you get more comfortable, you'll be able to pull those in, and you'll be able to see how those work in a synchronous meeting such as this. So I don't recommend abandoning them all, just ones that don't lend themselves to being online. Here's how I like to think of these live meetings. Those of you that are big basketball fans talk about how coaches they coach a game every 4 minutes at a time. They coach the game in 4-minute segments because that's how often they're going to have a timeout. And then they can put new players in, or they can change strategy, or they can put a new play in. If you can think about your live class session, 30 minutes, and then you think about it in those 3 to 5 minute stretches, and that's how you're going to lead your classroom, I think you'll find that it's very effective. So some strategies that will work really well in an online environment, you can still model how to solve a math problem, model how to think through something. You can still do that modeling. The Frayer model works really well. So we're talking about carrying capacity in my class. And so I can pull in and I can say, all right, guys, start typing in the chat. What is carrying capacity to you? Type that in the chat. All right, what does carrying capacity do? Start typing that in the chat. What does carrying capacity look like? Start typing that in the chat. What is carrying capacity not, or what does it not do? And so the Frayer model works to kind of keep that rigor up for your instruction. But again, a lot of the instruction strategies that you can use in the classroom are still very versatile and can be reused in the online world. You're just going to have to think about how you would adapt them. And then the other one would be sentence frames. These are really good for the online classroom. So if I'm looking at one that we did after we looked at a graph, I would have asked the students, as the wolf population in Yellowstone decreases, the elk population increases or decreases because, and then I would have everyone type in the chat, all right, does it increase or decrease? Boop, 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 boop. And then I would have one student, I would say, all right, can anyone explain their because? If you can, raise your hand. And so what they do is they type RH in the chat, and I'd look for a student that might be willing to unmute and share their description about why they think the way they do. So it's good to still have kids explaining their ideas and not depend on this as a complete lecture, but I might do that for 4 minutes, and then I'm going to switch into something like a video next. Like I said, short readings, one-pagers will still work. Data charts, anytime students can be looking at data, that's easy. You can put that on a Google slide. You're good to go. Anything in that neighborhood is still really good stuff that can be reused in these online live trainings. Instructional videos. definitely show brain pop, and then have some follow-up questions about the brain pop. Have multiple choice questions about the brain pop. Um, Use review slides, just like if you can think about the clickers when students could hit A, B, C, or D and you could immediately see their responses. What you may want to do is, all right, pose the question, say, all right, we're going to have wait time, and then everybody's going to type in the chat all at one time so that you don't see them just copying the most used answer in the Google chat. That's definitely a good strategy. All right, what's left? So like I mentioned earlier, you can use Google Meet on your phone. If you're doing the instruction, I would do it from a computer, but invite those students that may not have the greatest internet but can get data and can access a Google Meet on their phone to access the Google Meet every day at 9 a.m. or whenever it happens to be to get their points for NTI for the day. It might be the best way to get some of those reluctant kids to participate. Whenever you're logging in, I recommend getting into the classroom 10 minutes before the class is scheduled to start. So if you're meeting at 9, be logging in at 8:50 and have some of those pre-class conversations like you would when students are changing classes in the hallway. The other thing I would tell you to do is celebrate those birthdays. Find out from students what's going on. Hear from them. We sang happy birthday a couple times in my live class. Say the pledge, the school motto, stick to some of those traditions that are going on. Anything that you can do to produce normalcy for these kids in the live environment is great. And they're going to be looking forward to getting into your live class every day. They're going to be looking forward to seeing you and hearing you and being a part of a classroom, because ultimately that's powerful. That's why they come to school in the first place, is to be a part of something great. And like Colin is telling us here, who's awesome you are. You're going to do a great job with this. This is going to develop slowly. And that's great. I'm just looking forward to hearing all the success stories that you're going to have with Google Meet and how this will transform your live instruction. Be well, everyone.